Now it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage the Chief Executive Officer of AMEC, Warren Pearce, Rebecca Tompkinson, the Chief Executive Officer of CME, and Owen Whittle, the Secretary of Unions WA. Can you join me in making them all feel very welcome? Come on up. All right, sit wherever you would like. Go for it. We're going to have a bit of a conversation. I'm going to mix it up. There we go. Love it. Just around champions of change, and probably, what an interesting backdrop for all of us to have to talk about with both the Minister's remarks, the Premier, and then the data that Professor Parker just presented there. I guess I'm interested, and Rebecca, I might come to you first. A lot of conversation this morning presenting the data around the state of the industry. A lot of talk about the work that's already been done and some encouraging data on the improvements since 2018. Can you talk to us about what your organisation's doing to drive cultural change? What's that looking like for you?
Thanks very much, Holly, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Such an important conversation, and I think what all of the addresses have had in common is a real understanding of the significance of this industry to not just the human factors, but also to our productivity as a nation. And that's a very important conversation to have. That I love Sharon's adage at the end that if we look after our people, which is absolutely the overriding piece for us as an industry, then everything else pivots out of that, and how focused we are. Specifically for us as an industry, we've come together from the very beginning. We didn't wait for the reports to come out, and we took action. We established our Safe and Respectful Behaviours Working Group at the Chamber of Minerals and Energy, which has more than 40 member companies coming together to talk about the significance of this issue. And more importantly, which is I really feel the part that we are absolutely focused on, is how do we deliver real change on the ground. I'm very proud of the work that the group has been doing and our leadership team has been undertaking, and we launched yesterday our Supporting Safe and Respectful Behaviours Industry Actions document. It's the second iteration of that document, and what it does is really talks to the tangible pieces that organisations can deliver on the ground. It's best practice, it's about supporting each other, it's working in partnership, and it's learning together. This never, ever happens fast enough, and we need it to happen faster than it has before, and absolutely committed to delivering that change on the ground.
Warren, Rebecca used the word partnership there, and I know that's something that for me has felt like a very clear word and through line through a lot of the presentations this morning: collaboration, partnership. No one component of the industry can do this themselves. You've been working a lot in partnership with government around workplace health and safety reforms. Can you talk to us about the change and what that's looked like for your organisation?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things around what we've done here is actually change the way we think about psychosocial safety in our workplace and how we treat mental health and emotional challenges, is to move it to a safety context rather than a HR and IR context. And that safety is the one space where the resource sector really does share. Actually is quite open about, we share our stories, we share our experiences, and we learn from each other. And that's a really important thing we need to leverage here. Not just between companies, between the associations, between the employer and the employee associations, and with government. I think the other piece is, I'd say, we've got to keep doing that. I really think when there's a lot of times people in these companies face the difficult choice around what they think they should share or shouldn't, lean into sharing. Lean into volunteering that information, find ways to share those stories and the way we're addressing these issues on site and in our companies. It will get picked up, and it does help, particularly my end of the sector, with the smaller and the junior companies. We rely on support from some of the majors and some of the larger companies to share their policies and procedures, and that's what AMEC sort of focused on. We've developed a resources hub. We put together a mine safety management system plan that becomes a core piece for our organisation as part of the new work health and safety laws, and made sure that psychosocial safety is a key part of that. And I think that's the thing that I guess I keep coming back to, which is if we all work together on these issues, we've got a real chance of making a difference here. If we continue to do it in a siloed approach, then some companies will do well and other companies won't. And that doesn't deliver the change we need for our industry.
Owen, we were talking earlier about, and I think Minister King's comments on the video this morning spoke a lot to the importance of attracting more female talent into the industry, seeing more women in leadership. What needs to be done to achieve that?
I think this is a really vital part of how we eliminate harassment in our workplaces. We know in industries that have got far greater gender diversity, we have far less harassment that's occurring in workplaces, particularly where those workplaces concentrate on a range of the things that Professor Parker talked about around work design. I think we've got a long way to go about making the resources industry an attractive place to bring in people of a diverse background. I think we have struggled with that, particularly in how the jobs are designed and created. I think in Western Australia, we've come a long way in terms of developing the frameworks around health and safety. 10 years ago, we talked about bullying and really only talked about bullying. Now we have a whole range of ways to talk about psychosocial safety and harassment and assault in our workplaces. We can't just let that get dusty on the shelf. We have to keep on with that. We have to keep on looking at work design, job flexibility, job sharing, and a range of other manners that will ensure that we bring more people into the industry.
Two things I heard in what Oren said there. One was around, we're having a different conversation, so it's progressed, that's positive. But the second bit, it's structural and tactical. You're talking about things like work design, you're talking about how do we actually change some fundamental things that will make a difference. Rebecca and Warren, I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. What else do we need to do to make the industry more attractive, to not just attract talent, but to retain it when we find it joining us, for that matter as well? Do you want to go first, Rebecca?
Thanks, Holly. It is really important the way in which we design our our policy areas. So we know that the changes many companies have been able to make in ensuring that parental leave is regardless of gender, and really looking at how we can support people in our workplace, how we can build that diversity across the team members that we have by really putting in place practices that enable many different people to come into industry, and also ensure that we are providing a workplace that supports people's ability to be who they are and to come together to ensure that the work practices that we have deliver change in our work environment. We touched on the presentation by Dr. Parker, showed how important that transformational leadership is, how important it is that a diverse team comes together, and that means many different types of even personalities and skill sets. We know that when we have a diverse team, our safety culture is safer. We know that our productivity is better, and we know that it's just frankly a far more fun place to hang out. So the more work that we can do with our parental leave practices to really establish that as a common way of being able to participate in the workplace, the more that we can support different backgrounds and people of different skill sets to join our industry, but also to really ensure that we are part of a transformational change, that we have absolutely heard the challenge that is in front of us, and we are committed to making real change on the ground. In order to deliver that, we need everyone to come with us, and we need everyone to be a part of that change. Again, in that last presentation, looking at what is the one thing 1,100 people here today can do when they get back to their workplace to make that change. So those statistics that we hear in 2 years' time demonstrate our real commitment to delivering on the ground.
Here. And I love that note, continuing to ask ourselves through today and refine that answer to that question, what's the one thing I can go back and do? What's the one question I can make sure is asked around our leadership table tomorrow, next week, whenever there's an opportunity to do so? Warren, what would you add?
All of the above. Well, I think the big thing about this really is it's not enough to say it, we've actually got to do it.
Yeah.
So we've all got this commitment. And that's comes from across the industry leadership and all the companies. We've actually got to demonstrate to the community, our future workforce and our current workforce, we can actually deliver on the things we're promising to do. If we're able to do that and our messaging matches our actions and our achievement, then we'll be successful in this space. And I guess what I'm really conscious of is that the 1,000-odd people here today primarily are the practitioners, the people who are doing this within the companies. So I know all the work that you're doing, and I know that there is no simple solution, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. We're going to do all of these things, and we're going to have to keep doing them year on, year out, just as we've done with safety, in order to make a positive change in our industry. But I think one thing is you should expect from your leadership, and you should try and hold us accountable to is, and this is what I'll walk away with, and I've been over the last 2 years, is my role is holding accountable our members, our managing directors and our CEOs, that when I'm sitting with them, I'm reminding them their responsibilities and their obligations here, and that we are making sure that they are giving all of you the resources and support that you need to be successful in what you're attempting to do in our industry, because we very much rely on all our employees to actually deliver these changes. So that's I guess our commitment going forward is where we think about what our role is now, is actually holding ourselves to account on the commitments we're making.
I want to pull on this thread. We're talking about transformational leadership. Warren, you just said we've just got to do it. Oh, and we're here under the banner of this conversation is about being a champion of change. I want to come to each of you in turn. If we're talking a room of 1,100 change agents leaving here today, what advice would you offer from your own lived experience of transforming culture, of being that change that you've wanted to see inside the industry, inside your organisation? What advice have you got for how to do that effectively? How to get buy-in, how to overcome obstacles? Because, there's going to be people from all different starting places in this room today, hearing this and going, yeah, I get it, but thinking about the barriers and the challenges that lie ahead. What advice can you leave them with around how to actually move forward from today?
So I think I'll pick up on two things, and one thing I'll say today is that there's been a lot of talk of executive leadership and executive culture. I think the room here today and the largely professional nature of everyone in the room is a long way from where harassment and assault is occurring on site, and I don't think we can leave it at a conversation on this level, and my reflection would be that there's not enough conversation happening on other levels. Certainly from a trade union perspective, I've spent a lot of time in male-dominated industries, particularly before I moved to the peak union body, certainly reflected of a lot of uncomfortable things that I witnessed, particularly when I was much younger and didn't necessarily have the skills and ability to be able to speak my mind, and especially in cultures where that didn't exist in a lot of workplaces. That's why I think trying to concentrate at this level will have some good impacts, but if we're not actually replicating that in making sure that, I'm going to mention it again because it's so important, but job design and work design, that there is actually some skills and good training and cultural change occurring at all levels of industry. These conversations, will start in this room and then people will leave this room, and unfortunately it won't go as far as it needs to go.
That's a great shout out. So job design, work design, and making sure these conversations are happening at every level of your organisation. Warren, what would you add?
Borrow, pinch and steal. Don't think you're alone in your company or in your team. The reality is there's an entire industry of companies working together on these issues, taking their own approaches, trying their own initiatives, learning from each other. Look around outside of your company, across the industry to see what people are doing well, and take those things back into your organisations. And I think the other thing is continue to test how these things are working. Because I think we're trying a lot of things. There's a lot of initiatives. Some are based on strong evidence. Some are based on good concept. We don't know exactly what's going to be effective and what may not hit the right spot. So we've got to keep testing those things, and we particularly have to keep testing those with our employees and our workers, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to tell us what their experience is and whether what we're doing is successful or not.
Love that. Borrow, pinch or steal. There's plenty of great minds and organisations represented here today that are doing this work. So don't be afraid to ask, to borrow, to add on to. And also I think one of the things I heard you say, Warren, is sort of creating a learning culture, both inside your organisation, that preparedness to experiment, but also collectively. Let's share best practice. Let's actually create a culture of best practice, in the way that we work together to solve these problems. Rebecca, how about you?
I think the most powerful piece is to actually honestly know that we've got a problem. And that's what's so significant at the moment, is no one is shying away from what's in front of us, the depth of that, or the fact that we need to take substantive action. And I think that is incredibly important, because once we accept that there is an issue, then we have all of those resources, as Warren's saying, beg, borrow and steal, don't need to reinvent it yourself, together. There's honestly some extraordinary work from member companies, from organisations across the state, in how they are coming together to say this is absolutely unacceptable, it's not who we are. And it's so important that every single person feels safe in any way in the workplace. The other thing we really need to do is to celebrate those successes and be visible about it. So, I'm really proud tomorrow, back in this venue, we've got 200 young female students coming in to look at careers in our industry, from science backgrounds, from social science backgrounds, from environmental backgrounds, to really inspire girls to look at the possibilities of the resources industry. We're in the 15th year, Holly, of our Women in Resources Awards Night. It is the best event on the Perth calendar. I kid you not. We're going to send you an invitation.
I look forward to it.
And the most powerful part about that night is the stories from the women themselves, and just the energy in that room, really acknowledging how much our industry supports and how absolutely committed to change we are.
I think the point there for me was really walking that tension between acknowledging we've got a problem and we need to do better, and at the same time celebrating the wins and the progress, because we know cultural change doesn't happen overnight, and so we need to find ways to celebrate progress on the journey to ultimately making significant gains, which will take time, naturally, just by the very nature of the challenge in front of us. Final question for each of you. Obviously 1,100 people here today. You know, Professor Parker spoke about 2 years' time. We're going to come benchmark the industry and see where we're at. I'd love for each of you to reflect, firstly on a personal basis, and then secondly, I guess, on behalf of your organisation. What do you hope to see as tangible benefits from the summit? In 2 years' time, if we think back to this moment and what happened as a result, what would you like to see? Rebecca, I might start with you.
I just frankly want to see more women in our sector, and I think that we will absolutely see that in 2 years' time. I want to see a diverse workforce across the resources industry, full stop. It's not gender equity is important, but it's also making sure that our workplaces are safe and inclusive for any person who comes to be a part of this extraordinary industry, and I really want to see us shift the dial on those numbers. And I feel that on a personal level, it's so important, as I say, to continue to talk about the ways in which we can deliver change on the ground, and to know that every single piece is important, everyone's contribution is important. All three of us have incredibly privileged titles and incredibly privileged positions, and it's important to use that privilege to make sure that this issue stays visible and we continue to talk about it.
Brilliant. Warren?
I hope we'll see an acceleration of effort. So I think if you think the last 2 years of this journey, we've all done all the easy stuff. We've dealt with infrastructure, we've dealt with physical changes, we've dealt with CCTV and security. Now we're into the harder parts, which is around cultural change. And that is 1,000 different things that has to take place in that. We need to actually move that into a core part of our business now, and we need to make sure we continue to consider psychosocial safety as part of the safety culture, and that we continue to work on it. It's all about continuous improvement. So if we can see an acceleration of that effort and a recognition that that's what's now required, then I think that'll be a big win for today.
And Owen?
Certainly want to see a greater focus on prevention rather than response. To use as an example of a company I was dealing with recently, a major retailer had identified that they had a harassment problem, particularly of teenage women in their stores. In order to kind of respond to that harassment, they created a program where they encouraged staff to ask each other if they're okay. And, you know, unfortunately we're seeing that in a lot of places where there's the after impact is what's being looked at rather than actually how do you prevent the harm occurring. I think the resources sector is maybe slightly ahead of, well, definitely ahead of retail in that aspect, but I still think that we've spent a lot of time over the past few years talking about how we respond after. We've been handing out phone numbers for EAPs for many years. I still think we've got a long way to go in terms of actually how we talk about eradication and prevention, and that's the space we need to be in the next few years.
Phenomenal insights from these agents of change, and I think some really great suggestions for practical things we can take forward and aim to do, and some really great advice too on things we can just be mindful of in our leadership practices as much as in the actual strategy and scope of what we're seeking to do. Can you join me in thanking Owen, Warren and Rebecca for their contribution today? Thank you all so much. Thank you.